Hello, everyone, and welcome to our interview for July's Ministry Spotlight with Freedom Calling. We have one of my fellow GCers here with us today, Ainsley, and she is going to talk to us about a very important and much needed ministry in our area called Freedom Calling. So, hello, Ainsley. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing with us tonight.
Hi, glad to be here.
So, first off, I know you didn't grow up in this area, so what brought you here?
I actually came out here for a job on Vandenberg Air Force Base almost exactly 3 years ago.
Oh, wow. Super cool. And
Yeah.
where were you from originally?
I'm originally from Texas, but I'd been in the Air Force, so I lived all over. But the last place I'd lived was Texas before here.
Okay. So a lot of experience in other areas, not just the Central Coast. Very cool. So how did you hear about Freedom Calling?
I originally heard about it through a friend. She was actually doing a lot of the outreach ministry for Freedom Calling at the time, and they were looking for more volunteers. And she asked if I had ever heard about human trafficking in the States through massage parlors, and I had, and I'd actually been involved in some in Houston a little bit, some ministry there. And so I joined on here.
Very cool. So what is the mission of this ministry?
Yeah, so the mission is to basically bring freedom to the women that are enslaved into sex trafficking, particularly in the Central Coast. There's also a mission to help prevent young girls and women from going into that industry, either being tricked into it or going into it through other means.
Okay, so what's their how do they go about achieving those things or trying to?
So there's several different things. One is housing. They actually have partnered with other nonprofit organizations to acquire a home, and that is used for if women are able to come out of the sex trafficking industry, they go to that home. There's a full-time house mom at the house. There's counseling services. They do activities and develop different relationships there, and then they're also able to go to their appointments for anything they need to get to in town. Then there's outreach. That's the part of the ministry I'm most involved in, and we actually go out to the massage parlors. There's women who are Chinese nationals. Typically they're here under false pretense, or they got their passports taken and they work in these massage parlors. At nighttime, there's all over Santa Maria, and we go and basically try to show them the love of Jesus, let them know people actually care about them and want to spend time with them for something other than what they're there working for. And then we give them gifts. We leave a gift with them. So even if they can't talk because they're busy, which they frequently are, we're like, hey, we'd just like to leave this with you. And then other areas are reaching out to high schoolers, so at-risk teenage girls. A couple people go out to the high school and do like a program, an education program, to help them build self-esteem, build confidence, and so that they know who they are, and they won't be at risk in falling into that industry. So.
That's great. That's a lot of things. That's good. What captured your heart and your interest into this type of ministry?
I think it was mainly seeing these women that think nobody in the entire world wants them. They don't feel loved by anyone, and that's heartbreaking. A lot of these women aren't physically chained, they're not restricted from leaving physically most of the time, the ones that we see anyways, and yet they are so beaten down and in a low place that that's just what they're going to continue to do unless someone reaches out to them and I think tells them about Jesus is the best way to get them out, but also just reaching out in general and saying, hey, you matter, and you can have another option.
Yeah. Why do you think they don't just could they run out of the parlor, or would someone stop them, or why do you think they don't if they can?
So a lot of the bondage in the sex trafficking industry is psychological. they don't know anything. Like, they won't know the area. A lot of them don't know English very well. And or by the time they learn English, it's the only thing they know. Like, by then they've been in the industry for decades, and that's just what they do. Also, they might not have access to their passport, and if you don't have your passport, um, you can't do anything. Like, you're really a prisoner wherever you are. And even if they were aware that they could get a visa, which you can get a free visa if you're a victim of human trafficking, but you have to be able to provide information to the courts to basically turn over your captors. And a lot of them aren't willing to do that because they're either afraid for their families back in China, or they're afraid for their friends, or um, so many other, like, just fear factors in general affecting them.
If they went to the police, would they be helped or would they be in trouble?
I think it's kind of a combination of both. So the police are probably going to get them in trouble first, because, like, if they're doing prostitution, but then they're going to be like, hey, we can work with you and get you help. So that's kind of starting to change, where the police are more like on the side of like, hey, we need to help you first. So that's
Seeing them
been a
as a
big
victim.
shift. Yes, and that's been
Yeah.
a big shift in the last year.
Oh, good.
And Freedom Callings like helped be able to bring that about. And like, there's even a task force in SLO that we work with, that we can provide information about, like, say, a parlor, and like, we have this background information of all the times we've visited, and these are the signs of human trafficking in the parlor. And they can take that and use that to be like, yes, these women are victims, and we can help them this way.
That's great, because I bet they're scared that they think they can't go get help because they think they'll get in trouble or go to jail. Or, I mean, I can't imagine not really knowing the language, not knowing what really our culture, society's like, because it sounds like they're pretty much imprisoned in these
Yeah.
buildings, probably most of the day or all day, or I don't know if they must live there. Some of them
Yeah,
sleep there.
they live there and they sleep there frequently. Sometimes they live like in a back house of the owner of the parlor.
Yeah, so they're pretty much slaves. They're
Yes.
slaves here in America.
Yes, it's modern
Right.
day slavery.
Yeah, that's horrible. And it's just like right in our own backyard. Literally,
Yeah.
it's just, down the streets or whatnot.
All over town. It's really sad.
Yeah. Well, that's great. You guys have been working with the police force to help them understand and bring awareness and see them more as a victim who needs help, than them that they're the ones actually doing something wrong. So that's good. That's a huge step in the right direction. Can you share some stats about human trafficking?
Yeah. California is actually one of the largest areas for human trafficking in the United States. I mean, part of that's because we're such a big country, state, part of
Yeah.
that's because we are, so like on the West Coast, so we're closer to China.
Yeah. LAX, San Francisco, big airports.
Exactly. And at the Central Coast, we're like right between those areas. So as women are moved from one city to the other for the big events, these women will frequently follow like sporting events or big concerts, and then they're in the area and they move them around. So there's basically the market provides a different choice of women, which is what they're doing.
Bad.
I think in the National Human Trafficking Hotline processed almost 8,000 human trafficking cases since 2007. And that was several months ago, so it's even higher, I'm sure, by now. They looked into nearly 25,000 cases in California, and just because they didn't prosecute doesn't mean that that wasn't a case of human trafficking. It's very likely that it was, and they just didn't have the information they needed for prosecution. Yeah.
That's crazy.
And that's actually something the outreach also can help with, that documentation I talked about, where we document people sleeping on site or other at-risk factors can contribute to a case that can help shut a business down.
Yeah, they need people advocating for them because they don't have anybody.
Exactly.
Yeah. So what does an average night look like when you guys go to the parlors here in town? What's a typical night for that?
So we usually get together, all meet up and pray for the first about 15 minutes, just that for safety, that the women would be available, because a lot of times they're just busy and they're not able to talk, that they would even open the door, because sometimes we don't get in the door. And after that, we drive around to a certain set of parlors. We try to focus in a certain time period on like a group of 4 parlors out of the approximately 20 that are in Santa Maria. And so we'll repeatedly hit those ones. And that way we can try to build a relationship where they know, like, hey, we'll come by, like, we're consistent. We knock, we say, hi, are you busy? And if they're not, they usually let us in, and they're happy to chat, because they don't get many people that just want to talk to them. If they're not, we give them a gift, and then we have Bibles in Chinese that we're able to give them. They're actually in Chinese and English, so they can they can work on learning English if they would like on their own. We ask them if they need anything, and then frequently we're able to pray with them. So we'll ask if they need prayer for anything, or sometimes we're like, would you like a blessing for your family and or your health, because those are very important in Chinese culture. And so they'll frequently be like, yes, and so we get to pray with them, and that's kind of neat too. After that, at the end of the night, we all meet up and kind of like talk about like what we saw, like if anything was distressing, because I mean, typically there's not, but it is like a very dark environment. So we want to make sure everyone feels okay, and then we usually pray again and head home.
Okay. And how often do you guys usually do this?
Twice a month.
Okay. Very cool. What are some obstacles do you think that Freedom Calling is having to go through?
I think a lot of it is just people, having more people to go out, because like I said, we reach 4 parlors on a regular basis, but if we had more people, we could have one group go to 4 parlors and the other group go to 4 parlors every week, and that way or every other week, and that way those people would get a consistent feel for seeing those faces, and just being more comfortable about potentially opening up, because if someone wants to leave human trafficking, they need to be able to trust the person that they're going to tell, because that's a huge step. Oh
yeah, definitely. That would be scary for them. Like, who's this random person trying to be nice to me? What if I end up in a worse position than I am in now? Or that.
Yeah,
that and super scary.
Yeah. For them. Exactly.
Yeah. Can you tell us a story from your time with Freedom Calling, something that stands out to you?
Yeah. One time, we went to this new parlor, and we went by, and there was this girl named Jessica, and she was a little nervous at first because she didn't know who we were, and like we hadn't been to this parlor because it was new. And she came out and she chatted with us for a bit, and happened to be Chinese New Year, so we got to talk about that. And so, which was actually a pretty good 10-minute conversation for that night. And then we said bye and left her with the Bible and a gift. And then the next time we came back, she came out, and she was clearly with a customer, and she was kind of embarrassed because like her dress was a bit shorter, and like normally she would like to have a longer dress. And you could just tell that she was like, oh no, they're not going to want to see me like this. And we were able to just be like, hi, Jessica, like, how are you? It's so good to see you again. And and then she was obviously busy, like, we see you're busy, but can we leave you this gift? And she like, just like her face just like lit up, that like we accepted her basically.
Yeah, you didn't judge her.
Yeah, even though it was more apparent the business that she was in, it was harder to pretend that we didn't know what she was doing.
Yeah, well, I'm sure those little things just leave a really lasting impression on them. Like you said, you need more people so you can have more of those instances with these women. What do you think could greatly help like stop sex trafficking, or at least slow it down in general?
I think
that's a big question.
Yes. The prevention methods, we're talking to the at-risk girls in high school. I think that can really help, because although we deal with like the Chinese women in the massage parlor specifically
Yeah.
for our outreach, it's a very real issue of American girls getting caught up in the human trafficking industry in the United States as well. So just the knowledge that exists, it's a real
Yeah.
thing, and it's something to actively avoid. And
Do you
prevent.
think the American girls are like they're in more of a hidden sex traffic location because they would know they could run and get help?
Actually, no, because when I was in Houston, the people I talked to were Americans, and they
They're in
were
parlors also, or
they
where
were
were
not
they?
in parlors. They were out walking what they call a beat. Like they
Oh,
walked
okay. Like
big
on the
blocks.
streets.
There was no one physically restraining them. I did notice like several of them would not have smartphones. So like they would have a flip phone and it's all they had.
Okay.
Um, yeah, and some of them seemed like they were probably more just out for the night and then might not be out much after
Okay. Crazy. So how can anyone at Element get more involved?
that. Well, the biggest thing that everyone can do is pray, because it really does make such a difference. Like when we go out, if people are praying, you can just frequently feel a difference. Like more doors are opened, more women have time to talk. It's a big difference. Also, if people want to potentially get involved in outreach, even just to check it out so you know how to better pray. If you can't come twice a month, then they could do that as well. And people can contact me, or I guess.
Yeah, we'll put up an email.
Great.
That they'll see.
And the other thing is, if people wanted to get involved behind the scenes, like we do give them gifts, like really small things, like a little notepad or some fruit or a flower or something like tied
Yeah.
together in a little bag. If anyone was interested in getting a group together and providing that every now and then, that would also be very helpful.
Very cool.
And if anyone wanted information on helping out in the schools, I could connect them with the person who does that with Freedom Calling.
Okay. Also, are men allowed to go with you guys into the parlors, or is that?
Yes, we actually really like that, because a lot of these women have never had any man like treat them with any respect. So obviously we leave it up to the men to trust, to know themselves and whether or not
Yeah.
they should be in that situation.
Environment. Yeah.
But it's actually a very, very good thing for the women to see godly men who are willing to treat them with respect and pray for them and actually have a conversation and not want anything from them.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then I know you mentioned there's like a safe house that if they want to get out, they can go move into it.
Yes.
Does the house need anything like
Actually,
food or donations of any kind?
I could find out about donations, but I do know they are in need of people who are willing to drive to appointments, especially lately, because a lot of their volunteers were, because that is still going on during COVID.
Yeah.
A lot of their volunteers were older and needed to stop driving to appointments
Okay.
to limit their exposure. So if anyone's willing.
So to help drive like a woman to like her to a doctor appointment?
Right, to a doctor's appointment, and different appointments they have, just to help get themselves back on track. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. And then, so most of the women you said are Chinese speaking?
So the women in the house are not Chinese speaking. So
okay.
If we are able to get someone out with outreach to the massage parlors, the plan is to temporarily house them in our house in Santa Maria, and then work with another safe house, potentially like in LA, that's more better prepared for Chinese nationals.
Okay. So the women in the home here, they're English speaking?
Yes, they're English speaking and Spanish speaking. Yeah.
Okay. But for the outings, if anyone did speak Chinese, that would be helpful, right?
That would be so helpful.
I know that's, yeah. A lot of people do not speak Chinese, but.
Oh, and that is a good point. We actually use the Google Translate app. It works relatively well,
Okay.
surprisingly, to have
That's
like short
awesome.
little conversations. Yes.
Okay, awesome. Cool. Gotta be creative there.
Yes.
Yeah. Great.
Oh.
Well, that's really great that you're volunteering with this ministry and really helping to get the word out, because I think that's a huge part of it is there's not enough awareness that there's sex trafficking of all ages and nationalities, but like specifically, like you said, in our area, the parlors are mainly, Chinese women, and they feel trapped, I'm sure, and scared. So that is great that you guys are doing that, and I hope people will feel led to pray and to help out, volunteer in a way that they can. And that's awesome. I'm really proud of you for being involved in that and
Awesome.
really reaching, the least of these, like you said, people that just feel worthless and like nobody in the world cares about them at all, just used all the time. So you really being the hands and feet of Jesus. That's awesome that you're part of that. And we're glad to be able to come alongside you and hopefully bring some volunteers to your team so we can reach more people in our area and try to stomp out this just horrible injustice and sin that is just around us. And we drive by them and most people don't even think anything of it. Like, oh, there's, a massage place. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But not what it says it is.
Not,
yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Not one you want to go to. And it is exciting when we see them close because, like I said, the task force has picked up and they are closing them. And it's like, oh, that one's no longer there. And it's like,
that's
yay.
Awesome.
Good news.
So how can you tell when a parlor is an actual like sex trafficking parlor versus just a regular massage place?
Oh, that's a really good question. If it's a parlor that's a lot cheaper than other massages, that is a good sign. If none of the people who work there speak English, that's obviously not a guarantee, but it is something you might want to take a closer look, like maybe peek around a corner. Do you see a mattress like in the back, even just a hint of one? Or are there like rooms off to the side that like you notice no one during the day ever goes into, or they're open particularly late and that seems to be like where people are going at nighttime, that kind of thing.
So if you think a normal person went in and was just like, oh, I'd like a back massage, would they be like, oh, sorry, no, you can't? Or would they actually give you a back massage? Or do you know?
No, it depends on the place, but several of the places are also set up for regular massages as well. So people are potentially supporting an illicit business.
And so some of it might be more hidden, and some parlors is like more in the back and you have to kind of like specifically ask for it. And then others, that's all they do. And, they're just gonna act weird if you come in and want.
Yes. And when you're on outreach, you can tell it's like, oh, okay, this is clearly where some regular customers would go. Or, oh, there's like clearly like a shower there, a mattress there. Like, this is not a legitimate massage business.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And what do the police need in order to be able to shut them down? Like, is there anything we can do if you are driving by and you see something? Is there something that's helpful for them, that or would it be a more in-depth thing?
It's usually a more in-depth thing. If you ever suspect like a parlor and there's a minor, that is the fastest way to get someone shut down, because then you can call the police and say, hey, I saw a minor in this parlor and I don't think it's a legitimate business. You might want to check it out.
Okay. Very good. Well, I think that's about it for our interview, but we will put your email up so people can contact you if they'd like to find out more information or, get more information or find out or ask questions or join your team. And just like you said, come try it out. If you have a free, what nights do you guys usually go? Is it Thursday nights?
Thursday nights.
Okay. So every other Thursday night, they could, tag along. Like you said, you're never by yourself. And there's always multiple people with you.
Yes.
And everyone's protected. And
yes, we have at least a group of 3. One person stays in the car and 2 people go inside together.
Okay. Very good.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Ainsley. And guess we'll talk to you later.
Thanks, Justine.
Bye.